Hey everybody, welcome back again. I've got another Caterpillar 10 video for you. I've been slowly pecking away at this project, getting it all put back together, and have been spending a lot of time correcting little things I've found wrong with it along the way. I want to show you what I did to repair the front hand crank on this. The problem I've had with this tractor ever since I've purchased it is that I cannot engage the hand crank with the engine to start it from the front. That really hasn't been too big of a problem because this tractor does have the factory option rear crank attachment on it, but as long as I was into this, working on it, I wanted to correct this problem up here in the front to figure out why I can't make this front crank engage with the engine. And it didn't take long to find the problem. You can see this empty hole here in the end of the hand crank shaft. That's where the cross pin is supposed to go, that engages with the claw here on the front of the tractor's engine to turn it over. So with that pin missing, obviously this hand crank doesn't do any good. So I took the entire hand crank assembly out of the bottom of the radiator and cleaned it all up, had a good look at everything, and found a few problems. So my initial plan was just to make a new cross pin to press in the old shaft, but I found that the bore is pretty well wallowed out. It's all egg-shaped, and that obviously had started to run loose, got progressively worse, and then had fallen out. Another problem I found with the shaft is that it has a pretty bad bend in it out here at the front end where the crank handle attaches. See if I can place it next to the ruler here, and you can see that gap up at the top showing how bad the bend is. Turn it around here and see a pretty good gap in the middle. So with those two problems there, I decided it was going to be easier just to abandon this old shaft and make a new one. So here it is. I got the new shaft placed next to the old one, and I just transferred all the dimensions from the old one and used them on the new one. Hopefully they're a pretty good match. I see no reason why this isn't going to work just fine. Pretty much a direct replacement. I'll give you some specs on this quick. It's a 7/8 diameter shaft, 9 inches long. I cut the keyway in the end of it for the hand crank using this keyway cutter. It's 1 1/8 diameter by 3/16 of an inch wide. Went in there and cut that out nicely. This little hole for the cotter pin that retains your return spring is just a 9/64 diameter hole, and I put a 7/16 diameter bore in the end of it for the new cross pin. So with the shaft done, next thing I did was make a new cross pin. And this is also a 7/16 diameter pin, and I made this just to be a light slip fit into the end of the shaft. It looks like the original one was a tight press fit in the old shaft. I could have went that route, but I chose not to because I need to assemble this thing into the radiator without having to take the radiator off the tractor. And what I mean by that is if you have a pin that's pressed in the end of the shaft and then go to put it in the bottom of the radiator, you'd obviously have to come from the engine side of the radiator forward with it and then assemble everything else. And of course, with the radiator mounted on the tractor on the engine, I'm not going to have enough clearance to do that. So in order to just be able to assemble this with the radiator in place, like I said, I made this just a slip fit. You can see I dimpled the cross shaft in the middle, and I also threaded the end of the hand crank shaft to accept a 1/4 inch by 20 set screw. So I'll go and slide this in to the radiator from the front. At that point in time, I can just go and slide the pin in. Hopefully you can see here, line that dimple up underneath the set screw bore. Then the set screw can go in, and once it's tightened in, it will find its way down into that dimple in the end of the cross pin, hold that in place and keep it all well secured so that nothing is going to rattle and fall out. So now that I've pretty well explained what I did with making the new shaft, I'll do just a quick dry run reassembly here so that in case anybody's never been into one of these, they'll have a little bit of a heads up on what to expect if they ever have to take one apart. So basically you got your bearing flange here. This is the engine side, of course. Next goes your return spring, and this washer slides on. Now we'll see if I can make a fool of myself here. Let something go flying. This is where that cotter pin goes through that bore, retains your washer against the spring, and that's what keeps your hand crank popping back away from the engine when it's running. And you have your front bearing flange, and of course the keyway for the hand crank goes in the end of the shaft there. If I can get this to line up right on camera. Of course it already goes wonky on me. There we go. At which point the hand crank goes on the front. So that's a pretty comprehensive rundown of how this whole thing assembles down in the bottom of the radiator. Okay, I've got it all put back together. Time to test it out. I like it. So overall, I'm happy with how this project turned out. I like how everything fits and how it functions. Probably the only other thing I'm going to do is get some fresh paint on some of that exposed bare metal before it rusts. But overall, pretty happy with how everything turned out. Guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. As always, I thank you for watching. Hit the like button down below if you like what you're seeing. Feel free to leave some comments too. It's always fun to read through that stuff. And I hope to see you back next time.